It says it's okay. Now we're live on YouTube. Hello, friends. You might notice that I am not in my office today. Yeah, I decided to try going out into the world. It's a bit of a cloudy day today, but it's nice and comfortable temperature-wise. Yeah, let's hopefully the internet is fast enough that it's not like a big mistake that I was out here. Yeah, if you're new to office hours, let me just take a moment to explain what this is. And let me share my screen in 1 second. Here we are. So KCD Office Hours is just your opportunity to come and ask me questions, ask me anything, and I will do my best to answer. And I may not know the answer, and I will tell you if that's the case. But I do try my best to give you the answers that I can. And yeah, actually, after office hours today, you can stick around, not in the Zoom, but in the Discord, because we're going to play a game that is going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, feel free to stick around for that if you're interested. And I think that's everything. I give preference to questions that are asked in the Zoom call. But if you have a question that you don't want to ask in the Zoom call, or maybe you weren't here or whatever, you can post questions in the Discord here, and I will go through those when I run out of questions in the Zoom call. So yeah, with that, I think we're done. Anybody here in the Zoom call have a question they'd like to ask?
Yeah, I have a question about Storybook. Is that
Hey there, Steve. Yeah, sure.
Is that for building component UIs primarily, or is that overkill to put in your average app?
Yeah. So.
I mean component libraries.
Yeah. So I've used Storybook for component libraries and it works really well. And I've used it for apps too, because all apps have some components that are reusable throughout the app, and so it can be useful for that. And I've even used Storybook for like pages. So I'll render an entire page and I'll just provide it mock data. And with MSW now, it's even easier to do that. And the benefit of that is there's actually not a super strong benefit of doing that, but it can be useful sometimes if you want to, like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, does that replace unit testing, or is that?
No, it wouldn't. So you are testing when you're like pretty much anytime you're using your app as you're developing, that's testing. We call that testing, but automated testing is different. And so, yeah, Storybook is not going to replace your automated tests. There are tools that you can use to use your Storybook stories in automated tests, and you can run an automated test for all the different Storybook stories you've got. But yeah, just because you have Storybook doesn't mean you can stop using automated tests.
So what's the benefit of using, I mean, because I know it automatically starts to create documentation for you and stuff like that. So that would obviously be a good choice if you wanted to create a component library. But if you're just making an app, what is the advantage of adding Storybook along with any other tech? I guess, so it's not considered testing at all. It's not considered testing at all. Is it mainly just the primary purpose is to document? Is that its purpose?
No. I mean, there are some benefits. Like, for example, it makes hot module replacement automatic. Like so like if you don't have that set up in your own config or whatever, you probably do. Like you're probably using a meta framework like Next or Create React app or something that has HMR. So you don't need Storybook for that. But if you have your own thing and you don't have HMR set up, that's one situation where I used Storybook. But another is so and to be clear, like it's not a replacement for automated tests, but it is testing. Like using your app is testing. Yeah, it's not a replacement for automated tests directly by itself. It's not only useful, or I would say it's primarily useful for playing around with components outside of their the regular situation. Like a good example of this would be like a drop down that you have in a long series of forms. If you're working on this drop down and it's on page 3 of this, forms that you have to fill out, then if every time you're making changes, you have to like click through and go to that form, then yeah, that's not super fun. And so putting it inside of a storybook means that you don't have to go through that whole process. You can have it isolated, you can work on it, iterate on it, and then test it a couple times in the whole flow. And so like that's the sort of thing that you wouldn't maybe put that in a component library, but it's really useful having Storybook along for the ride makes that kind of useful too. Now, and you don't have to do Storybook to do something like that either. Before Storybook was around, one thing I used to do is I would take the code that starts my application, and I would just comment out everything and just have it render the one component I was working on. and so that ended up working out pretty nicely for me for those situations where it's like, well, I have to like do a whole bunch of things just to get to this component I'm working on. I'll just move that component over here while I'm developing it. But then if you want to, every time you want to work on that component, you either have to go through that flow or you have to update your code so that it's just rendering the thing that you care about. Whereas with Storybook, you just keep it there and it's always there ready for you to work on it. So yeah, it's kind of a long answer to your short question, but basically Storybook is useful, especially for component libraries, but it's also useful for apps because all apps are built out of components and you can put any component in Storybook.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Chaiwa, is that how you say your name?
Yes, Kent, that's my name.
Great.
I just had a quick question. I posted in Discord in the React Hooks channel. I've been facing a challenge. I'm migrating the project from the class-based components to hooks, and I joined I bought your course just so I can learn some of this because I'm pretty new to React. So, but I'm having a challenge with kind of an action that I posted in the channel, like dispatching it. I'm getting a really hard time. So if maybe you could look at this thing structured, and maybe you could advise how it should then be dispatched with the use dispatch.
Okay, yeah. So let me read through this, and you can correct assumptions that I'm making here. So we have this utility fetch triggers that I'm not familiar with this, but I'm guessing this is from Recompose. Is that right? You have a promise and then types.
It's like they are doing a custom action creator, but they have a middleware that intercepts such actions, and then if you scroll down, I pasted the code for the middleware. That's a middleware. So it intercepts, like if an action is of type promise, and it does that kind of stuff, and then it returns those actions to the reducers, to the stores reducer. Yep. And as you scroll down, that's how they are like now applying that middleware, like as part of the store. If you scroll down, just there. Sure. Yeah. So now I'm getting an error when I dispatch it from use effect. I dispatch it with the project ID like that. Like, the usual way, like they were expect to dispatch an action or something. I get a kind of an error. So I was like stuck. I wanted to maybe get some ideas, like why do I get this?
Well, so this actually, this error seems unlikely to be related to this middleware and the dispatch.
Okay.
Do you only get this error when you do the dispatch?
Yes. Yeah.
So oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I can dispatch these other actions that are like normal. Like I just dispatch an action with a type and maybe a payload. It works well. It goes all the way to Redux and it works well. But when I dispatch an action of that type, like the way I've just described to you, I get into such a problem. So I'm trying to figure out
job
where.
Edit, is this job edit, is that the component where you have the use effect that's dispatching the action?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Do you have the code for the job edit component?
Yep, I have.
Can you share that here?
Okay, so it's pretty long, but
Oh, okay. Well, I mean,
let
you
me
could also,
just, yeah,
so
I paste it.
let
Or
me
should
ask
I?
one other thing. So
Yeah.
are you using ESLint plugin React hooks?
Yeah.
You are, and are you following all the rules of hooks, or
Yes.
are you
So
ignoring
this.
the exhaustive def or the rules of hooks plugin or rule?
So it's I'm following, and there's no. I want this dispatch to take place when the component mounts. So this is how let me just paste how I've plugged in. Where should I paste? Should I paste it in the?
Yeah, let's put it in the
Discord?
KCD office hours here. In that,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So I have office hours.
It's in the meetups category.
A minute. Oh my goodness, can't find it.
If you do Command K or Control K, then you can type KCD office hours, and that should.
KCD office hours. Okay, found it. Hey, I'll write something.
Alternatively, if this is a problem, you could also share your screen.
Okay. So
whichever
let me
way
just...
you prefer.
Oh, sure. I think sharing the screen would be much easier.
Okay, cool.
So let me share my screen. Desktop, just share my desktop. Okay, so let me just remove some of these console logs. Are you seeing the screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so I have, this is like a very big component, but it used to be a class-based component. And these are some of the helpers. So maybe because I'm very new to functional components and all this stuff, so maybe the way I'm structuring it is where the issue is. So I have this state and use dispatch, and grabbing some of this stuff from params, history, use selector. Then I do all these declarations for some helpers. But towards the end, of this thing, I'm now trying to use effect to mimic the implementation in class components. Yeah. So the first thing it does is when I dispatch these simple actions, if you look at switched menu, it simply dispatches an action of type switched menu, and it works without problems. If I dispatch, the challenge is if I dispatch an action like fetch credentials or fetch triggers, I have an issue because of the way fetch. Let me just show you like an example of how fetch credentials is designed. So fetch credentials is designed like this. So it has a promise and types. And now it calls, this is like an asynchronous, because it's like it returns a code to actual, so it's asynchronous. But the challenge is these actions, they are intercepted by this middleware. So they intercept them using this middleware, and once they are intercepted, then they are returned to let me see, they are mixed up. Like here, this is how they combine them together and bring down to the reducers. But the challenge is, you see what I'm saying, right? So now job edit, when I dispatch this type of actions, I'm landing myself into these problems. So if right now, if I showed you the
So
application,
what I need to see, what I don't need to see any of the implementation of the async code or anything like that. What I need to see is in the component what the hooks that you're calling are, because that's what the warning is about. Is it's saying that you're calling different hooks between different renders, which normally only happens if you have some conditional stuff going on with whether you call hooks.
Okay, so there are two components in this. So there's a job edit.
Well, the one that's triggering the error is the job edit component. So that's going to be the one that's where the hooks are getting called incorrectly.
Yeah. So so far this is the only hook I've activated and trying to test.
So that's not entirely the case, because you're using a bunch of other hooks that aren't built in, but they use built-in hooks themselves. So it's not going to be down here. Well, actually, it's possible. You're not using any hooks in your JSX, are you? Here, go ahead and let's take a look at the JSX.
Okay, like which side of JSX?
Down further, where you have the starting at that return form. That's the JSX.
Okay.
Holy cow, that is quite the component there.
Yeah, this one.
Is that like a browser-based IDE?
No, like it's a component. It's a component, and it also makes some calls also it uses hooks as well.
Yeah, wow, wild, cool. Okay, sorry, I just was distracted for a sec. But yeah, we're not going to have any trouble in this one. This isn't where the error is coming from.
Okay.
It's going to be in the job edit. So keep on scrolling down a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, keep going. Yeah, okay. Everything looks fine there. So scroll back up to the top of job edit.
To the beginning? That's the
top. Yeah, to the top of the component.
Okay.
So use state is fine. Use dispatch is fine. Use params is fine. Use history. Use selector. Okay, so no, that's fine. Yeah. Oh, yeah, this is the problem on line 64 through 66. So you have that double ampersand there. And so in the first case, that use selector state stuff, that presumably is returning null or undefined. And so the second use selector is called. And then on another time around, that first one resolves to a truthy value. So the second one is not called. So what you need to do is make sure you call them both and give them both a variable, and then only assign, and then you do the logic as a variable. So here, let me share my screen now.
Sure. No, I appreciate that.
Here we go.
Great.
So here's what you need to do. Let me find an editor somewhere. Okay. So you've got const thing is use selector and use selector. Okay, so that's what it is now. All you need to do is take this first one and make it a variable. So whatever makes sense. I don't know what would make sense for what you call it.
Yeah.
And then take the second one and do that. And that will solve your problem.
Oh,
so you just refactor it. And so the reason that this makes a difference is because now both of these will be called every single time, regardless of whether this is truthy or not. And I'm surprised because I would expect that the code that you showed me would violate that rule. And actually, I've got that rule up and running over here. So let me just try this over here, because I'm pretty sure that you should get a warning. And if you don't, then you need to make sure you get that rule set up or if I don't hear, here, let's try this, use state. So React, there we go. So yeah, I'm getting an error here. It's called conditionally. So my guess is that you don't have that rule configured properly. And if you had, then you wouldn't have run into this problem because the rule would have told you that there's something wrong. So go take a look at your ESLint config and make sure you have it configured properly so that you don't run into this issue again.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad that we found
Thank-
it, because sometimes with those things where it's like there's a lot of code here, I can't figure it out without having a
All right. Thanks for your help. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Anybody else in the Zoom call? We do have a handful of questions in the Discord chat, and I'm happy to go to those, but those in the Zoom call
Hello.
always get preference. Hey there, Mohammed.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Can you see me?
Yep.
Hello, I'm from Iran. I talked to you last week, and I implement the thing that you said, and it works great.
Good.
It even has the keyboard functionality, and it's good. Now my question is, I'm using Enix, if you have ever saw it.
Yeah,
And,
I'm familiar with that NX. Not very familiar, but I know them.
And Enix has, we can create a library, and can I share the screen for
Sure.
you? My question was around TypeScript, and I want to create a custom wrapper around the basic of around the basic type of TypeScript.
Okay.
Can you watch now?
Yep, I can see
you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, great. And this is my, for example, this is my button.
What I'm looking at right now is the Discord. There we go. Perfect. And now
Is
I
it
can see
okay
the
right
editor.
now?
Yep.
Yeah, great. When I'm creating the button and for the types of the TypeScript, I had to create bottom HTML attributes that wraps the bottom element. And for TypeScript to understand the on-click events and the other things. This is a simple button.
Yeah.
And for that, when I'm passing the ref, again, I had to create, I had to go here and add the ref for the types.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a correct way of doing it, or?
Sorry, on which? Oh, yeah. Well, hold on. Scroll back down a little bit to the bottom there. Because so you're passing the ref onto the button base, and then your button base, you say you need
It's a styled button.
Okay.
It's a styled button.
If you don't provide the ref in your type, do you get a TypeScript error for that?
Yes.
That is unusual, I think. Let me see the button base.
The bottom HTML attributes that wrap the bottom HTML bottom element doesn't contain the ref itself. It only has bottom HTML attribute has on-click, all of other DOM elements, DOM attributes.
Yeah.
The ref doesn't exist.
I haven't actually ever done this before, so I may be wrong, but my intuition tells me that TypeScript should know that any React element can accept a ref prop, and you shouldn't have to specify that. There could be people who know more about this, or let me rephrase that. There are people who know more about this than I do, and many of them are probably in the Discord. So I would suggest putting this example in the TypeScript channel and see if other folks have ideas. But my intuition tells me that you should not need that ref prop. That I feel like TypeScript should just know that every element that you render can accept a ref prop.
I had one more question that around your one of your writings. You said, for example,
actually, hold on a second. I just was thinking about that more. You might need a ref prop for custom components because passing a ref to like a custom component, the only time you ever really do that is if you're using use imperative handle, in which case TypeScript doesn't know what properties that ref is going to have. And so you may need to say, here are the properties that a ref would have if they passed a ref to this component. So I amend my initial intuition and think, yeah, maybe it does make sense that you'd need a ref. But yeah, still ask on the Discord, because they may know.
It even didn't understand that, for example, the button has on click or other types. I had to create, the bottom HTML attributes to at least understand.
Oh yeah, you definitely need that for sure. Because you're forwarding all the rest of the props onto the button. But TypeScript doesn't know that's what you intend to do with those props, and so yeah, you definitely need that for sure. Yeah, that
one more question.
Button props type is fine. It's just a question on the ref, and I'm starting to think that what you have is correct.
We have a component with refs properties. I tried that too, instead of FC component with ref, but it didn't work properly for me.
Yeah, I think that it makes sense that you have to specify what the type of the ref is. Yeah, that makes sense.
So ref HTML.
Yeah, because for you're just forwarding that onto a button, but you could be doing something else with that ref entirely. You could be calling use imperative handle or something to add properties to that ref, and so TypeScript just needs you to specify what the type of that ref will be. That makes sense to me.
Correct. I will
sorry,
ask
what was your other question?
Yeah, I will ask your community again.
Yeah.
My other question was around one of your blog posts. You said we shouldn't, let me create search, for example. You said we shouldn't create, an option and pass the options to our custom components. You said we should create, it should be a wrapper, and the option should be a child of this component. Yeah,
typically you'll find things scale a little better if you specifically implement a compound component sort of thing for this type of thing. I should clarify that, like, not necessarily, and maybe you don't need it to scale. Maybe this is just a one-off component or something, so maybe it's fine. But if you want this to be reusable at all, then using compound components will make it a lot easier to reuse over time.
Yeah, my usage is here, for example, this type of checkbox. Is it okay for them to be an options, or I had to create, the icon and the text should be separated? And
yeah, so I mean, let's just to be clear, there's nothing matters more than the fact that it works. So if it works, then it's fine. But in my experience, especially when coming back to maintain this, if I look at a component that just accepts options, then I have to learn what those options like. I don't know. I have to learn that API, and it doesn't feel as natural to me as having a component that has children, and then those children can specify exactly what they need to render, rather than having an icon option. And then what happens when you have one that needs an icon on the right and on the left, and different
this
things
is
like
the
that.
example. These are the same. These are the same. I create a variant for that.
Yep, there you go.
Small and
Yes.
large.
So that's evidence of this problem right there. Yeah. If you instead design
this
it in
is
such
large and this is a small.
yeah. So and you'll I mean, maybe that's as far as it's going to go, and you're fine with having an if statement in there. It's, but I don't know if you've seen this talk that I've given, but let me find it for you. And because this is what you're building, I think you'll find it to be very relatable. It's called Simply React, and let me grab my latest rendition of this talk, and I'll stick it in the Discord here. Yeah, give that a watch. And like I said, nothing matters more than the fact that it works, but I think that you'll have an easier time if you change things a little bit to specific for this one. Compound components seems to make the most sense, I think.
And also, all of these pages are form itself. For example, this page is form, this page is form. It's okay to create all of them like this. For example, a large form provider. All of this part of the page is a component. This part of the page is component. It's shared between all of them, and a form provider wrap all of these pages separately.
Yeah.
Okay,
so there's a form provider around each individual page, or around
each individual page.
Yeah, that's totally. So in fact, I don't see that enough. I think that we should co-locate our form or co-locate our providers in general. And in fact, whenever you're using, there are a lot of component libraries that use context inside of their internals. And so you could have context just within a small subset of your components. And that's totally legit. There's no problem. You don't have to put all your providers at the root. And actually, I do have a blog post that kind of touches on this as well that I'll share. It is, co-locate state. I think I'd talk about that in there. But yeah, just the idea of putting stuff as close to where it's used as possible is a good thing.
Yeah, all of these pages are form itself. Great, thank you. Thank you very much for
it. Yeah. All right, Afis, I see that you have your hand raised. You can correct my pronunciation of your name as well, if you like.
No, you got it right. Afis is fine. Just a quick question. Am I right in saying if you have a custom hook that's based on a Redux state and you wanted to test, I guess you wanted to test the Redux state within the component, for instance, say I have a state and I want it to return this if something happens in the custom hook. Am I right in saying that the best way to mock the state would be to use the wrapper on the render hooks as opposed to doing a mocking the selector? I kind of feel like that's the neater way to do it. I don't know if that's the general concept.
Yeah. So let me make sure I understand. You've got a hook that's using Redux.
Yes.
And you want to test the hook. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, the way that I think is not only easiest, but definitely provides more confidence is to, you can actually use React Hooks testing library for the hook. Yeah.
And then use the wrapper.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I would suggest using that wrapper and providing a Redux store, and that's where you start providing mock data and stuff.
Okay,
Yep.
that's exactly how I have it right now. Other places all over the code base kind of seems to be mocking, which I don't really have much confidence in. So I just wanted to just double check if that's the kind of the right path to go down. Obviously, this means that it's not a big deal, but this means that the hook itself would be a TypeScript file, but the test file will be a TSX file because we're using the provider in it. But I suppose that's not, because when you wrap it around in a provider, the file is not a TypeScript file anyway. It's now a component file. It's seen as a component essentially. That's the only difference, I think.
Yeah, well, so actually, personally, I often will just put TSX on all of my files if I'm going to be using React, even if the file doesn't use JSX, just because I hate that. I hate that so bad.
Yeah.
Just like, let me use JSX. But yeah, so
I was saying the custom hook itself is essentially pure JavaScript phrase. It's just a TS file, right?
Yeah.
When you're testing it, the provider is, because you're referencing the provider as a wrapper, that's not just a TypeScript file. That's essentially a TSX file.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That was just me trying to it's a sanity check basically.
Yeah. You get it. Yeah, I guess that's everything. Cool.
Cheers.
Yeah. Anyone else in here have a question before I go? Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to give Remix myself.
Sorry, I can hear you. You're kind of the microphone sounds a little funny, I think, but I'll try to make.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, it still sounds the same, but I can understand you mostly.
Yeah. So I tried to implement Remix myself. You can see it on Discord in the I made this channel.
Okay.
My username is Mokshin06. So I tried to implement it by myself.
Sorry, which channel did you post this to?
I made this inside the text section.
Sorry, which channel?
Let me just post it on the Office Hours.
Okay. While you're doing that, somebody in the Discord just asked where I am. Right now, I am at a park in Pleasant Grove. It's beautiful, and it's a little cloudy for my taste. I like sunshine and blue skies, but yeah, I mean, it's comfortable weather. Right now, it's like 66 degrees, so a little bit on the cool side, but yeah, it's really comfortable. Okay, sorry, let me take a look at what you got. So you really like the idea of Remix and its features. It has actions, loaders, and data fetching, mutation, form hook for optimistic updates. So I'm guessing you saw the demo the other day because they showed all that stuff, which is awesome. Thought it'd be fun to implement it by yourself. Oh, cool, premix. That's very well done. On the naming choice there. That's great. The code inside the app directory is what the end user would be writing. Cool. Here, and I'll you know what? Let me share my screen here so we all can look at and enjoy this. I think doing stuff like this is awesome, by the way. So you got your app directory. You're using pages. They use the convention of routes is what they call it. Okay.
You can check the action file that has like most of the stuff in the action file.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's using the pending form hook as well. Yeah. So you can see like the API is very similar to it. Right now the action receives the express request and response objects instead of like the web fetch API. I can share my screen to show the example.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, and to be clear, are you looking for just feedback or?
Just feedback.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your ultimate goal? Is this just for fun project or?
Yeah, it's just for fun.
Okay.
Yeah. I took it as a challenge to like try how much I can build it by myself.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I love projects like this.
Yeah, so it has live reloading just like Linux. So if I go to the action, yeah, suppose I enter a name and an email. Yeah,
Sweet.
so that
And that's
was
connected to
happening.
Prisma, like that's actually hitting it.
Yeah, yeah, in the
Cool.
action, it's creating a user like this. Yeah. So it has this. I mentioned in the README the other features. It uses ESBuild internally. So if I just build it,
When did you start
build,
working on this?
I think it has been only like 5 or 6 days.
Wow,
Not
yeah, that's
much.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So it also purges like it reshakes loaders and actions and meta from the client bundle. It's using some Babel plugins for that.
Oh, interesting. So you're using ESBuild and Babel?
ESBuild is bundling all the files, and all the files that are in the pages directory are also using a Babel loader.
Interesting.
So yeah, think it's in the plugins. Yeah. Yeah, all the pages all the files that are in the pages directory, transform it using Babel as well, and then they pass it to ESBuild to transform the JSX under the stuff. Because in ESBuild we can't access the AST right now. So for that, I'm using a Babel plugin that removes these actions and the loaders from the final bundle.
And you built all this yourself?
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm 14 years old.
You're 14 years old?
Yeah.
Dude, that's legit. Good for you for working on this and building all this stuff. That's awesome. Yeah, this is cool. I don't know how much feedback I can offer. I'm sure there are lots of things that Ryan and Michael have built into Remix that I don't know about that
I was
nuance
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. I was only able to do all this because like they have only made all this stuff public till now. The validation and all, I don't know how that's happening, so I haven't implemented it yet. The styles are also similar, like yeah, it returns the URL and then you can just start the style sheet. And yeah, so the routes are also code splitted, they are lazy loaded, all of the routes. And if I just start the final production build, it will also preload all the direct imports that are in the root file. So you can see it is preloading all these chunks and the data is being served into.
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
It looks like you've taken made a couple of different decisions from an API standpoint and stuff, which I think is cool too. What a cool learning experience.
I plan on implementing. I plan on changing these two, or like they have changed it to the WebFetch API. I started creating the adapters for that, but they are not done yet. Like it takes express request and it returns a new request, which is from Fetch API. This isn't completed, but I think in the final version, it will use that. The API will be very similar to that.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it.
Yeah. Some of the missing features are, I think I mentioned it on the Discord. Yeah. Client-side routing isn't there yet. Right now it's doing server-side routing because I was having some issues in the client-side routing because before changing the route, I want to fetch the data for that route. And then I want to set it to the context. So I was having some issues with that. Currently, it uses that routes.ts file, which I just showed instead of file-based routing. So I will add that as well. And currently, it's using like raw ESBuild and the plugins which I've made for it. But I was thinking of switching it over to Build. So that will add like hot module reloading and CSS code splitting and other things. Yeah, so this is what I've implemented yet till now.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you can also like lazy load the components. So I've created a loadable helper. Right now this button is static, but I can change it to be like a loadable component. Yeah, so I can just go to the components. Yeah, components, and inside there is a button file. Yeah. So if I just build it once more, now that button, that's a bug that I just discovered.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, no, this is cool. I think I'm
I'll
gonna
fix
move
that.
on to the next question. But
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That's really awesome that you're working on that, and it's really impressive. That's a lot of work. So very cool. Cool. Eric, I see that you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, I had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen so it makes more sense.
Mm.
Okay. Okay, so basically, let me know if you can't see for any reason, but I'm basically building like an OAuth social login settings screen. And these are the 4 providers that I'm just trying to do for now. And basically you click on them and it has a form that pops up, right? And this is still a work in progress. So it's not wired up or anything like that. But as you can see, pretty much Twitter, Google, and Amazon, they all have the same form. And I'm simply just changing like the header and the word in there, right? But then Facebook has another input called app version. And so I kind of didn't want to create 2 different components that have all the same fields except, a specific one for Facebook just to add the app version in. So I was just hoping to get your like input on what you think the best approach would be to deal with that, because right now I'm kind of just injecting it in. So this is my main form here. And then here are my form fields. And I'm basically like hard coding the enable toggle at the top and then the redirect URL, because they have all the forms have that. I also realize I have 2 other fields that are there in every single one, so I'll add those in as well here. But then I have like an array where I basically add in the app version manually just for Facebook.
Yeah. Sorry, I just realized I needed to make a note of something really quick, but I have an idea. The cool thing about components is that they compose together really well. And so what you could do is you make a component that's responsible for the form at large, and then you make components that are responsible for each individual one of those fields. And then you make one component that it uses that overarching form component and then uses each one of those fields. So there's going to be, rather than having configuration like you have here with the props and the as and all that stuff, instead you would make that a component with JSX. And so then you'd have one component that's responsible for all of the other fields, and then you'd have a total. Well, actually, sorry, let me back up. Anytime that I run into a problem where I'm like, so I've got these 2 things that are just so similar, so we'll just squish them together into this one component and just have a couple if statements or whatever. Anytime I'm in that situation, I always recommend duplicating it at first. So you mentioned that you want to avoid having a duplicate form just for Facebook, just because it has that extra field. But I would suggest that you do that. And then when you're done, you can look at both of these versions and see what are the parts within each of these components that could be abstracted out and just be used in both. And that is what I would suggest that you do, because what you'll find probably is that there are like individual fields that you could abstract away to components, or maybe there are sections that could be abstracted away. And then at the end of the day, you'd have two components that are pretty similar, but there's not a whole lot of complexity in their differences. And so having some duplication there is not a big deal. And I would rather have 2 components that are both quite simple with very small differences than having one component that has a bunch of complexity just for a single use case. Or for a single extra use case. So that's what I would suggest. And what you'll probably end up with is one component that has a little bit of logic between Twitter, Google, and Amazon, and then a totally separate component that has no logic at all. It's just the stuff for Facebook. And then both of those components are built on top of other components that are common between the 2. Does that make sense?
Yes, right. So basically just have two different like visual components that are wired up behind the scenes with all the form logic.
Mhm.
Got it.
Yeah. And actually, I do have a talk that sort of touches on this. And I think that I mention it in this blog post because it's like a talk blog post. Yeah. Yeah. So the talk and the blog post are there. You can take a look at that. That's kind of the way that I think about these sorts of things.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking.
Thanks.
Anybody else in the Zoom before I go to some of these Discord questions? Okay, sweet. I'll go to the Discord. I'll share my screen so y'all can see what I'm looking at. And there we go. Okay, so we had a bit of a discussion up earlier. Let me just make sure that we touched on all this stuff. Yeah, so Damien's wondering about Chakra UI. Yeah, I don't have too much more to say about it. Most libraries have some mechanism for overriding styles and stuff. I really like Reach UI's approach to giving you just the styles that are necessary for accessibility reasons, and then you style on top of that. And they give you all the class names that you need. I really prefer that over like a fully styled thing, because yeah, I mean, like maybe those work well for little toys and demos where you don't care to style it yourself, but I mean, I want to, I don't know. Normally you want to style it yourself. So I'd prefer just minimal styles, if any. But yeah, if you like that, that's great. Yeah, and Austin has been asking about use callback and whether or not use callback will keep previous definitions. So I don't think that they ever made an example that I could go off of. And since it's 10:23, I don't want to take the time, and we have more questions. I don't want to take the time to create an example. So Austin, if you're listening to this, then if you could create like a code sandbox that demonstrates what you're trying to experiment with, and I can play around with it too. But to answer your question the short way, React only keeps the last version of your function with use callback. And if you provide it new dependencies, then it throws away that old one and it takes the new one. And it's always taking just the last one. It doesn't keep track of older ones and give you back an older one when you get the same dependencies or whatever. That drastically simplifies things for React. It potentially avoids bugs, though not necessarily, but potentially. And yeah, just it in general, like it frees up memory too, so you wouldn't want it from a memory standpoint as well. Yeah, and you don't know when garbage collection happens, but you can just expect that when nobody's referencing it, it will get garbage collected eventually. Yeah, okay, so Kelvin is asking about two questions. Oh, right, yeah. So data structures and algorithms. Yeah, unfortunately, and when we're talking specifically about PayPal. So when I interviewed at PayPal, there were basically no data structure algorithm questions at all, because we didn't do that on the job. Not for UI dev, and I did backend work there too, and I mean, maybe we implemented some data structures and algorithms just naturally, but like we never got into like, oh, let's find the best way to search this binary tree or whatever. Like, no, we never do that. So my interviews at PayPal were very practical, and those are the types of interviews that I gave were really practical. But I can't guarantee you that your interviewer will be that way. Even if you're interviewing at PayPal, you may still end up getting an interviewer that just wants to ask a data structure algorithm question. Yeah, so in any case, I think it probably is a good idea to brush up on those before an interview, but whether you should maintain that kind of depends on what type of engineer you want to be. For a UI engineer, we really just don't use that a whole lot. Maybe if you're doing a lot of like the back end of the UI, like we're talking building React or something, then yeah, okay, maybe data structures algorithms could be useful for you. But if you're just like throwing buttons on a page, probably not. I pretty much focus on the needs of the task and as far as like what I allow to stick in my brain, and I let everything else fall out. Now, that's not to say that you could potentially benefit from having that stuff in your brain, and like if that stuff were more forefront in my mind, maybe I would write my code differently, and I would realize that maybe I don't necessarily need those things, but my code would be better if I were better at those things. But all I can tell you is my experience, and my experience is that I have not really used a lot of like the data structures algorithms as we think about them. I mean, technically an object is a map, that's a data structure. but like when we're talking about data structures, we're going a little bit beyond those types of simple data structures, I think. So that's what I'm basing my assumptions on for your question. So yeah, so as far as Remix supporting pure ESM dependencies, they don't currently, but they're going to. They use ESBuild, and I'm not sure about this, but I'm pretty sure there's a way to say, hey, ESBuild, just ignore dynamic imports. Don't compile those, because that's the only way to for a CJS module to consume a native ESM module. It's just a dynamic import. And so if there's a way to tell ESBuild to just not compile those and just leave them as they are, because Remix modules are themselves common.js modules. So you're not going to have a Remix app that is an ESM module. And that will probably be the case for a while. I'm not sure if they're planning on, I'm sure it's on the list to eventually support native ESM app, but yeah, definitely consuming native ESM packages is on the roadmap, and it will probably happen soon.
Hey, yeah. Yesterday, during the demo, I asked in the chat the question that whether the routes are code splitted or not in Remix. Yeah, and I was told that the routes are code splitted on per page basis. And in ESBuild, we can't do that without using the native route, so ESM. So I think that the client bundle does use pure ESM.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, the client bundle does use native.
In Webpack, there is there's a complex virtual file system, but in ESBuild, there is nothing like that as of now. So you can't do code splitting on the client without using native ESM.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah,
I was thinking on the node side, but yeah, on the client side.
On the node side, if you do a dynamic import, it changes it to a promise resolve, which just resolves your common.js module. And if you directly at the top level, you import a ESM module, it will crash. Yeah, in that case, it will crash.
Yeah. Thank you you know more about this than I do. Yeah, so it will eventually support that. And then the second question of whether you're allowed to access Remix code base after you get the license. You don't get access to the source code, but you do get access to their built code, which is not minified or anything. So it's pretty minimal. And yeah, you can definitely learn from it and stuff. Yeah, it's cool that they don't try to obfuscate it. That would be super sad. Yeah, the biggest thing is that it makes your debugging experience a lot nicer, because you don't need to worry about source maps or anything like that. You can dive into the code, add console logs and stuff. And that's all going to be in your node modules. But yeah, you won't get access to their GitHub repo. They are trying to figure out how to allow external contributors to contribute to Remix eventually. That's not like high on their priority list, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Especially to documentation. And I think the biggest problem is they can't allow people to contribute to the repo without basically treating people as GitHub or as employees and paying for their seat in their GitHub org, because they need to keep the repo private for obvious reasons. And so, yeah, so that's a challenge. I think what they're going to do with the docs is they'll just move it to a separate public repo eventually, but so that people can at least contribute docs like typo improvements. But yeah, right now you will not get access to their GitHub repo. Hopefully that is helpful. Okay, sweet. Shinzi asking, why didn't you teach higher order components in Epic React Dev? So I didn't teach it in the advanced React component patterns workshop because you just rarely need it. And almost so for very rare cases is a higher order component preferable to a hook, specifically like styled components or something akin to that. Almost every other time you're better off with the hook. And so I didn't want to teach higher order components, but I actually did teach higher order components. If you look at the, oh, maybe that's not a short URL, actually, performance. I can't remember. Yeah, it is. Sweet. So in the performance, and actually, maybe I'll just show you the workshop content. So in this performance workshop, we actually do build a higher order component kind of secretly as part of one of the extra credits. I think it's in this one with state slice. Nope, that one. It's probably extra 3 with state slice. There we go. So there's a higher order component for you. Yeah, so we build that as part of the performance one. So you will get some higher order component stuff, but yeah, not from my advanced React patterns. I really just don't encourage people to use that pattern. It's not, of all the things that you can do, custom hooks are much better most of the time. And yes, so yeah, your assumption stands. That is the way that I feel about it. Okay, sweet. We're coming down to the end here. What is the best way to test if a user reloads the page for context? I want to check if content has been saved to local storage. Okay, so you can't really, I mean, unless you're going to be doing using Cypress, which you can, yeah, of course. You could do some interaction, refresh the page with Cypress. I think you just do another visit. I've never actually done this before, but I'm guessing you just do another visit or something. They may have an API specific for a refresh. Yeah, and then double check that everything was loaded properly. And the nice thing about that approach is that it's the fact that you're using local storage or IndexedDB is irrelevant to Cypress for that. You could even be persisting it in a database. It doesn't make a difference for Cypress when you go with that approach, which is a good thing. You get more confidence out of that, and you can refactor and change where that state is saved. But if you don't want to go through the extra work of Cypress, then you could just, what I do, and actually we do this in Epic React for as you're learning hooks, and I teach you use effect. We use use effect to save stuff into local storage. And so what I do for that is we just assert that local storage has state. So we'd say local storage.get and then get by the key and assert that state is there. And then actually, you know what? I was just working on this. I probably have it up. Yeah, I'm working on this literally right now. Right here. So I have an after each to remove this item from local storage. And then let's see, it's toward the end here. So we get the username from, okay, so here we render the app, we get the input, we type a value into it, and then we verify that the value that's in local storage is correct. And I do some extra weird stuff because this is, it's instructional material. I have to sometimes test the implementation a little bit, but in general, the idea is verify that the value is set in local storage as you expect. And then here I initialize it to something totally different. I re-render it. I actually use the key to unmount the old one, render a new one. It's kind of a fun little trick. And then I verify that it's initialized properly. So I verify that the input has the value of Jill. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend from a, like, if you wanted to test on Jest side of things. You render the thing, you do your interactions, you and then you render another thing or render the same thing and just verify that it's all initialized properly. And that gets you, and that actually, I don't know if JS DOM supports IndexedDB. I doubt that it does, but so you may need a mock if you switch from local storage to IndexedDB. But if you had that in place, then you could actually write a test like this without like caring about what's in local storage. So write a test like I described, where you do your interactions, you re-render it, and you verify that everything's initialized properly. You could write a test like that in Jest and refactor it from local storage to IndexedDB or whatever else you want. And that should work just fine. Hey, did you hear that car? No? Oh, it's because it's electric. Just the other day we were playing a game in Discord, and there was like a car that drove by that was just like super loud, and I commented on how crazy it is that it's just cars are so loud unless they're electric, and then it's like just a nice quiet little thing. Okay, anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Daniel. Good luck. Okay, Sean is currently going through Epic React course. It's been super helpful. Sweet. Any experience using React inside of a web component? No, I have stayed very far away from web components. I feel like they just did not deliver what they promised, and yeah, I'm hurt. Yep. So yeah, that's my general opinion. I don't want to go too much deeper into that because I don't want to hurt feelings of other people, but I really don't like web components. It's just such a shame. They really messed it up. Okay, Jaws is saying, our team needs to set up some testing conventions for our code base. Any tips on testing conventions? I mean, you can go take a look at my blog and kind of build conventions out of that. I haven't like codified my conventions, but probably one of the most valuable ones to look at is common mistakes. Yeah. Common testing mistakes, common mistakes with React testing library. Those two are probably good to look at as you're creating your own conventions. So yeah, good luck. Okay, Kyle is asking, not sure if I saw a follow-up. I may have missed it. Figure out the issue with an older version of React testing. Oh yeah, I did see that. It was, yeah, you needed to add an act. So that's good. I'm glad that you worked that one out. Daniel is asking, when using MSW for making test server for just integration, what's your recommendation to avoid re-implementing most of the backend logic? Yeah, Daniel, this is probably the biggest problem with mocking in general. When you want to simulate the thing that you're mocking as closely as possible, how do you avoid re-implementing that thing? And it is tough. You have to make trade-offs and decisions. What I did in the or the Bookshelf app was I literally implemented the backend because in production I use MSW for the Bookshelf app, and yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's tough. You pretty much only implement the parts that you want to test for. So if you don't want to worry about testing error handling, then your MSW's handlers don't need to worry about error handling. I wouldn't recommend that. You probably want to do some error handling tests. But yeah, that it's tough. Sorry, I should finish reading the question because you do talk about the Bookshelf example. Yeah, how well that scales with large projects. Yeah, and updating backend would necessitate updating test server. Yeah, so it comes down to what do you want to test? It like if you can get away with just using the backend and then having like mocking the database, then that's even better. But that comes down to an end-to-end test, which is not a bad thing. It just if you want to be more top heavy on the trophy, then that's awesome. You just end up with a bunch of trade-offs on reliability of the tests and the mostly because if you come around with a lot of trade-offs when you start using the actual backend for your tests. Like, okay, so do I need to spin up my own instance of the backend and then insert a bunch of test data into it before I can even run my tests? That's super annoying. So, okay, we'll have a shared backend. We just everybody uses that one. It's always ready for us to test. If that ever goes down, then you aren't able to test. And then, oh, what if somebody else is running tests at the same time as me and we mess up each other's tests? So you have to write your tests in a special way to not run into issues with somebody else messing up your tests if you're both running at the same time. So you have like these two options there. And then there's the third option of, well, let's just kind of mock everything. And then if you're going to go with the mock, and that's kind of the approach that I suggest because it seems like the least problematic. And has, yeah, just has the fewest problems. But then, yeah, you do have to kind of re-implement a lot of the backend logic, and you don't have to re-implement all of the backend. Like, for example, let's say that you're a podcast app and you allow people to record a podcast episode or something, and on the back end you like combine audio files and stuff. You don't have to re-implement all that. So like you're not re-implementing all of the backend. You might be re-implementing a lot of your backend if it's all just REST. But if that's the case, then MSW has a new data package that you can use that will take care of lots of that for you. And in fact, eventually I'm going to probably update the Bookshelf app to use that package, and we'll see that I don't need nearly as much of the custom logic that I have. So if it's all just like REST stuff, then yeah, maybe you will be re-implementing most of your backend because your backend is pretty commoditized and it's just like pretty basic. It's the stuff where the stuff that you don't have to re-implement is like the domain specific logic that your backend is doing, and that's the stuff that's hard. That would be hard to rewrite, and incidentally, it's the stuff you don't have to rewrite most of the time. So you only rewrite or implement the stuff that your tests really need, and that typically means that you need to support some REST stuff. And yeah, it takes a lot of work, and maybe it doesn't scale super well. I don't know. I feel like it'd scale pretty okay. I should be clear. I've never used MSW at scale. MSW came out after I finished working at PayPal, but I can translate what I know now to what I knew then. And I feel like we'd have a lot of success with MSW even at PayPal. So yeah, and I would not say that most backend changes would require updating the test server. And even if that is the case, then that's actually okay, because well, yeah, the fact is that anytime you're mocking, you have to simulate the way the thing that you're mocking works. And if you're not going to mock your HTTP calls, and instead you say, oh, okay, no, I'm just going to mock fetch, or I'm just going to mock the module that we use to interact with our backend, then you're in the same boat. Like, you're not going to avoid having to simulate the way that the thing that you're mocking works. So the backend server changes and you're mocking the module that you use to interact with the backend, you're still going to have to update that. And so yeah, you're not going to escape that at all. Mocking is tricky business, but it's worth it for the confidence. So good luck, Daniel. Thanks for the insightful and interesting question. Okay, so we're way over time now, which is pretty normal, but we're going to come down here toward the end of the question soon, hopefully. Bought a remix license and really enjoying it. Sweet. So I also enjoy my remix license. It's great. I have a feed kind of app. Yes, infinite scroll, data loaders. Yeah. So should the initial data be fetched via loaders and hydrated using React Query? Yeah, so I've never used React Query for infinite scroll or pagination or anything like that, but I know that it supports it well. And this has actually been on my mind because I'm thinking that when I get around to updating the Bookshelf app, I'm actually going to move it over to Remix. I just have a hard time recommending people use Create React app, especially when Remix exists. And I mostly use Create React app because I was like, you know what? I don't want to teach people everything there is to know about Next, as awesome as Next is. I'll just teach them, like, I'm here just to teach them the React part, and they'll do the backend stuff. But the more like as Remix has come out and the more I think about it, I'm just like, you know what? Remix is just the way to build apps. And so I'm going to teach people Remix. And hopefully by the time I come around to updating everything, Remix will have a free tier or something like that. So yeah, anyway, as far as like the infinite scroll and stuff, I'm thinking the Bookshelf app on the Discover page, when you search, it will have infinite scroll on that page. And my plan is with Remix, I think that's where React Query is really useful, is for infinite scroll. But I haven't experimented with it or anything, so I can't really give you specific advice, but I'm pretty sure that my plan was to have it get the data, use route data, from the loader, feed that into React Query, and then use whatever APIs they have for continuously getting more data. And maybe I'd be able to get more data from the loader, where we have a special param or something like that. And then the loader says, oh, okay, so you're loading more data. I'll just return more. And then you hit the loader directly. But I actually don't feel super great about that approach of hitting directors or hitting loaders directly. I think that I'd rather just let all loaders be only hit by Remix, because I want them to be able to change their the API or how they do that, and that be like an internal thing that they only need to worry about. And so for infinite scroll, I'd have a special endpoint as part of my Express app or whatever that I would hit to get more data. I think that's probably what I'd do. But like I said, I'm not sure. And maybe Remix will, I mean, they're still pretty new and it's in beta. Eventually, Remix may add special APIs for this type of thing, because it's pretty common, so it's possible. Thank you for your kind words. I hope that was helpful. Okay, we're down to the bottom. How important are front-end tests compared to back-end tests? It's hard to compare things like this in generalities. I mean, it doesn't matter how solid your back end is if the checkout button doesn't work. And it doesn't matter how solid your front end is if when I click the checkout button, the back end is broken. So yeah, I can't compare them. They're both very important. Yeah. And the different types of tests that you write on both sides can't be measured equally either. So a test for my my profile page or my settings page doesn't matter as much as a test for the checkout button or the login button or whatever, right? So like, yeah, you can't just measure back end, front end versus each other. They're all important, and at a granular level, they're important in different ways. So, what languages do you use for writing backends? I just use JavaScript for everything. I don't use GraphQL. I mean, I use it on my site because Gatsby makes you, but I don't use it. I think it was overrated and overhyped when it got started, and now I think it's leveling out where people are like, yeah, there are some good use cases for GraphQL, but it's not the best for everything. REST is still quite good. There are some solutions that GraphQL offers for REST that are not shared problems for everybody. Or they are shared problems, but the problem isn't significant enough to justify the cost of GraphQL. Because GraphQL does come with a cost. Every abstraction does. Okay, making a mobile app with Ionic. I used that years ago. And capacitor.js, I have no idea what that is. It uses WebView, thus rendering my React app inside a browser. What setting should I set my core's origin to? Yeah, so when I did this, I just set cores to everything. So I don't know. I just accept from everybody. I don't know the answer to your question. You might go to another, or maybe somebody in the community knows. But I would check out Ionic's official community channels. So good luck. Do you have any talks on micro front ends? Any experience with them in general? I don't have any experience, John, with micro front ends, but I have a podcast, and my friends are actually the ones who built Single Spot, which is kind of the big micro front ends thing. And let's see, breaking apps into microservices. This is with Justin McMurdy, a good friend of mine. And so you can listen to that. He has more thoughts about this than I do. But yeah, good luck with that. Okay. Tweet about the problem and what the solution is. Thank you very much. Okay, cool. Good luck. All right. Thanks, everybody. This has been fun. Thanks for hanging out. We are going to be doing a game in a few minutes. Yeah, probably a few minutes. I want to take a quick little break. But yeah, then we'll get going on that. So if you want to join us, that'd be cool. I will be around next week. I'm still planning on every Saturday for the time being. So if you have any other questions, then feel free to ask in the Discord and I will answer next week. And it's been fun. It's been real fun. We'll see you all in the future.